As my business has been growing, we have been spending more on ads. In fact, we had an agency for a few years running ads and content for people. And in 2021, we spent over $700,000 in ads just in my brand alone. And when you add in clients, we've spent over, well, I don't know the actual amount, but it's in the millions. And all of it has been profitable. So what I wanted to do today is break down our ads philosophy when it comes to creatives, copy, and messaging. I am a big believer that messaging is everything, but we have seen time and time again, a really good creative can change the results you're seeing with your ads. You need both of them working together. And today we're going to break down exactly what you need and how to do it so that you can have effective ad campaigns. So if you're interested, keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about ads, we're going to be talking about messaging, and we're going to be talking about evolution. I wouldn't say that we are known for running ads or let's just put it this way. We're not an ad agency. I'm not like someone who's living, breathing, eating the ad industry, what the latest trends are, or anything like that. We did have an agency running ads and content for a couple of years, but we shut that down last year and went all in on our courses and programs and the personal brand. But again, we are not a ad agency that probably knows like the ins and the outs of everything we need to know about ads. However, we are a messaging company, and a huge part of ads is the messaging. It's the communication. But I will say this, I do believe we do a great job with our creatives in combining creative and messaging together. And I was looking at what we ran back in 2021, and we ran, I believe, over $700,000 in ads just between our own, like my own ads. Like this is not anyone else's ads or anything like that. And then when I look back at how much ad spend we ran between ourselves and all of our clients when we had the agency, it's in the millions. So millions and millions and millions of dollars. And we've made pretty much all of it profitable. And so what I wanted to do today was talk about the things that we've used when it came to paid advertising. And when I say paid advertising, there's things like, not TikTok, but TikTok's a platform we will be exploring when it comes to paid advertising, but Facebook specifically, Instagram, we've done some YouTube. But today what I wanted to do is dive into Instagram and Facebook, because right now we see ad cost rising inside of Facebook. And there's a couple things we did on this last launch that really brought our cost per lead down, and some concepts that I want to share with you guys. And I do believe because of, there's a lot of reasons. Number one is inventory in these platforms is always going to be a factor. And what that means is that Facebook only has a certain amount of views or impressions or traffic coming in per day. When they have more advertisers coming in, we go to supply and demand. So when there's a limited amount of supply with a big demand, the cost is going to go up. So when more people start to advertise on Facebook, and Facebook only has a certain amount of space available for advertising, the cost to run an ad starts to go up. And we're seeing that right now. The other factor is that I believe it was Apple, and now Google's talking about doing it as well. It was Apple, but the iOS 14, they basically took some code or something away where you couldn't track Apple devices with the Facebook Pixel. So now your tracking is all out of sorts, which means that their targeting is all out of sorts. So basically what's happening is that Apple's saying, we're not going to let Facebook track the data from people using our devices. Well, the reason why Facebook works so well is because of their targeting options. And when they don't have the data from all Apple users, like their ability to target kind of goes down the drain as well. So long story short, Facebook ads are on the rise. And so when we went through this last launch that we just wrapped up, we started to see the highest cost per lead that we've ever seen. And on this last launch, I know we'll do a whole episode doing a debrief on our launch, but basically we hit over 20,000 leads in 2021 in our launch. So last year's launch, we hit over 20,000 leads. In this launch, we hit about 9,800 leads. So we hit roughly half. We hit roughly half the amount of leads that we hit last time. At first, I was kind of freaking out. I was like, well, I don't know. Does that mean we're going to hit half the revenue? Does it mean this? Does it mean that? And what I realized is that last year we had a conversion rate of 1.9, and this year we ended up moving it, I don't remember what it was, but way above 1.9. And so my thought was, well, if we're going to have half the amount of leads, what if we just focused on doubling our conversion rate? Because it's kind of low. It's 1.9. If we can get it to like 3.8 or 4, then we would still make the same amount of revenue off of the same amount of leads. So we started doing that. We started playing around with the numbers, but then I started to dig into the ads. We started to dig into the ads, and we started to test a lot of different things. And what I want to do is kind of give you guys the philosophies of what we use. We're going to talk about creative. We're going to talk about headlines. We're going to talk about copy. When we talk about creative, I'm actually going to pull Matt Johnson into the podcast episode today. So him and I can chat about creatives, what works, what he looks for. And he is our chief creative officer. So he's in charge of all content, all ads inside of the company. And so I think we could have a nice chat about that. But here's where I want to start, is that with rising ad costs, you have to understand there's also going to be more opportunities opening. And for me, I think one of those paid advertising opportunities is going to be TikTok and TikTok ads particularly. Yeah, there we go. And so we're going to be leaning into that. We're also going to be leaning into YouTube ads more than we have before, because I just think that Facebook ad cost is just going to start going up. But I think when you have all three working together, you can create some really effective campaigns as well. So one of our philosophies here within the company is that you just never know what's going to work when it comes to ads. You just never know. You have no idea what's going to work. And honestly, sometimes there's ads that I think are not going to convert at all. And they're like our best converting ads. And there's some where I'm just like, this is going to be amazing and this is going to convert. There's no way someone's going to read this and not opt in. And they flop. And I've learned, and I think Matt might have been the one who's kind of like pushed this into the company. But or maybe it was Taylor, or maybe it was both of them. I don't remember. But you just never know. You have absolutely no clue what is actually going to convert, which means you need to test and you need to try. And I think where most people mess up when it comes to ads is that they limit the amount of ads they put out. They're like, okay, I'm just going to create one ad. And they view almost as like paid advertising as the magical solution to drive leads to their business. So they create one ad or two ads or three ads. And they think as long as I just create an ad, then people are going to opt in. And we don't take that approach. We'll run 20 different versions of opt-in ads when we go into a launch. And look, I'll invest $200,000 into a big launch. So you better bet I'm going to try to put out as many creatives as we can and different copy as we can to see what's going to work. And so we'll put out 20 different creatives because, again, you never know what's going to convert. And I do believe that if you're only putting out like 2 or 3 ads when you want a result, you're really, really, really overpaying on your ads, unless you're getting lucky and one of those are just like hitting it and killing it, which is almost never the case. So you just have to understand you never know what's going to work. So when we went into this launch and we were running everything and our ad cost was like super high, I think it was well over $20. I was like, okay, we gotta do some things here. So what I ended up doing is I ended up going back, and I do sometimes I'll pop in and I'll play with ads. Every time we do a big launch, I always run my own campaign in combination with what our ad manager does, just because I love it. I love the testing. I love trying. I love like trying to create an ad that's going to convert. So I went in there and I was playing around with it and I'm like, well, let's just try something. Let's try some of our best converting ads from last year. So I went in and I found this ad where Matt and Jackie had put this ad together, and it was basically just a convo. And I think Matt scripted it, and it was just a convo between me and myself. So we shot it twice, and I was like the bad Brandon and the good Brandon, and we're having this conversation about like how version 1 of Brandon just created all this how-to content. Version 2 of Brandon was challenging why he did that. And it crushed it last year. But the problem is that the ad was leading to a workshop that we weren't even running anymore. And we didn't have time to edit it. And I needed it to run into our 3-day live event that we had in this last launch. So I said, screw it, whatever. Like, we're going to run it anyways. And I'm just going to change the copy around it and the headline around it to go say like, hey, we have a 3-day workshop. And it absolutely started crushing. It did so well. And it brought our ad cost per lead down by like $5, like pretty much almost overnight. And I think we had it had like 1 million impressions or more on it. And I think we had one comment from someone that was like, hey, this says to go to this workshop, but now you're telling us a 3-day event. That's confusing. Like, no one really cared. And I think a lot of times people will get into these ideas or these modes of like, well, we can't post it because it's old, or we can't post it because it says this one thing and it doesn't really totally align with this one thing over here. The truth is like hardly anyone probably got to the very end of that podcast episode to the end of that ad anyways. It was like 1.5 minutes. You got to understand, when it comes to ads, as soon as someone reaches a point in the copy or the conversation that says, yes, let me opt in, I need this, they're not going to finish watching the whole ad. They're just going to go and opt in. So if you can get your point across before the call to action, they're just going to go opt in anyways. And that's why the headline and copy are so important with the creative. So anyways, we ran that ad, started to go even more, started to convert even more or even better. So then I tested one other thing, and we're going to talk about this today as well, towards the end. But I tried to do something a little bit different that I've never done before, something that's going to capture attention. That's what I'm always looking for with ads, is what's going to capture attention. And we've always leaned really heavily in video. So I'm like, I don't have time to make videos right now or do any of that or write scripts. So I'm just going to try something super simple. And I just had a blank image that was white with black text on it. And one of the messaging elements we've been talking about really heavily on the podcast in our launch is all about being specific problems, specific mistakes, specific emotions. And I've always told our students, and I've been telling a lot of our new students, like, we have to start with problems. That's where your audience is at. We need to meet your audience where they're at. We don't meet them with a solution. We meet them at a problem. That's where the conversation should start. When you can meet them where they're at with the problem, you start to get into their subconscious mind. Oh, this is relevant to me. They automatically go, this is relevant to me. Yes, I am having that problem. They're describing my situation. This is relevant. I should pay attention to what they're saying. So I said, let's try it. And what I did is I created 3 images that were just white with black text on it, all asking questions that were related to problems. I don't remember specifically what they are. And if you were a mentorship student of us, we're going to give you a full breakdown on all of this as well. So we'll give you the ad copy and the images and all of that stuff. So if you're a mentorship student, don't worry, it's coming. But for you listeners, I think the main message here is just to focus on problems. But the problems were something along the lines of like, can't communicate in a way your audience understands? ? Is your content falling flat, not getting big engagement? ? Are you working really hard on content that's not producing any sales? ? So they were all asking questions. And that's it. That's all the image was just questions. And then obviously you have to combine it with copy. You have to combine it with the right headline and stuff like that. But this brought our cost per lead down again. So we were already at like, I don't know, $25 a lead. Then I switched it to the ad that worked last year really well, and it moved it down to $20 a lead. And then when we tested this one, we moved it down to about $15, $17 a lead. And you have to understand is we uploaded like 20 different creatives, and we just tried something new. They weren't really hitting. So we tried something new. We tried something new until it actually hit. And that's the biggest thing with messaging. That's the biggest thing with ads. It's the biggest thing with content. You never know what's going to hit. You may know, even with messaging, you may know what you want to say, but you don't know how to say it in a way that's actually going to land until you try it. And so a lot of our new students right now are going through the exercises and learning the frameworks and doing all of this stuff. And they're asking for feedback. What do you guys think about this? What do you think about that? Can I get feedback on this? And honestly, What the way I instruct our coaches is like, unless you see a red flag, tell them it's fine and they need to go test it. Like the testing and putting it out there is really what's going to tell you if it's hitting or not hitting. So it's about understanding what you want to say, then learning how to say it based off of data. Okay. And that's kind of what we look for when we create ads, is that I don't try to guess at what's going to convert or what messaging to convert. I'm looking at my top performing content. I'm looking at my top performing thought reversals, and I'm looking at everything to see what has landed in the past. Even our ads from last year, I just pulled the same ad in and tested it again, and it worked really well. Changed the messaging around a little bit, but the creative did really well. And so when we go into our launches, we're always looking at testing, and then we let that testing bring us data. And then from that data, we can make decisions to let our message evolve, to let our ads get stronger, to let our messaging get stronger. So the advice I want to leave you with before we hop into the three areas is that I want to leave you with understanding that you have to test and put things out there in order to fine tune your messaging in your ads. You're going to have to fail a little bit. You're going to probably going to lose some money with ads. Like, I think that's a great understanding to when you start running ads. Like, a great understanding is I'm going to lose money here. So maybe only invest the amount you're okay with losing. Maybe you won't lose it, but you're going to have to do some testing to really figure out what's going to work. With Facebook specifically, it also is going to take about a week of testing and running of the ad for the algorithm to really kick in. So if you know you want leads to start a week before your webinar, then you should probably be running your ad 2 weeks before the webinar. 1 week to let it learn, and then another week to actually drive leads. So maybe a lower budget for the first week, and then start to raise your ad spend after it has gone through its learning period. But understand that it will take time. You likely will lose money. It takes testing, and you just never know what's going to convert. So I would not recommend depending on one or two different creatives and just hoping that they work. Like, continue to test. And if an ad's not converting, it's usually not your offer. In most cases, probably not the title of your webinar. It's either the creative, the copy, or the messaging in the ad that isn't getting people to go opt in. You haven't hit the right pain points. You haven't hit the right language to get people to opt in. You know, sometimes it is other things, but in most cases, that's what it is. Like, maybe your targeting could be off or something like that. But if you're going after a very targeted audience, it's not converting. It's usually messaging or creative. So what I want to do is we're going to hop into the three areas. And we're going to go in this order. We're going to go and talk about creative. We're going to talk about ad headlines. And then we're going to talk about copy. And the reason why I'm talking about them in that order is, from my experience, what I've realized is that's the way people's eyeballs go. When someone sees an ad, usually their eyeballs go to creative first. If the creative is good enough to capture their attention, then they're going to read the headline. And then if the headline's great, then they're going to go and read the copy. That's usually, from our experience, that's the pathway of them consuming the ad. And so we're going to go through each of these right now. And so I'm going to bring Matt on. So Matt, welcome to the podcast. Come on, introduce yourself. Are you there?
Hey, yes, I'm here.
Hello. All right, Matt's here. So we're going to talk about creative, and then we'll move on to headline and copy. So let's dive into creative. Matt, you handle pretty much all the ads for us. Like, I know the team will have ideas and recommendations and stuff too, but usually, like, when we're super swamped, I just depend on you to come here and tell me what to do and do our ads. So I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. And I guess I'm just going to start off by asking you, what are some of the things when we or you come up with ads for us, or even like if you want to talk about our past clients, what are some of the things you look for when like brainstorming for creative when it comes to ads?
Sure, yeah. So one of the things that I talk about that I've talked about on some past webinars with students and stuff like that is that really the first step is consuming. When we're talking about creatives specifically, we want to be able to start consuming a lot of content, because when we consume content, we start to garner ideas around what's working and what's not. I'm sure you've done this in the past, Brandon. I've told people, to start doing this in the past, but usually when people are talking about like, how do I build my funnel? What should my launch look like and stuff like that? We'll almost encourage people to kind of make sure that they are opting in for as many things that they see online so they can go down those funnels and see what people are doing and things like that, and get ideas about what they can be doing from that. So the encouragement that I have, step one, if you're looking to start brainstorming, don't do it in a vacuum of your own thoughts. Let the creative ideas kind of come to you and influence from what you're seeing online. So start consuming, whether that's on TikTok, whether that's just scrolling through Facebook. When you're seeing ads and things like that that you like, hit the like button on them, because you're going to get served more of those, and you'll start to kind of understand more of the things that are working now and working currently. And then really the last note that I would have is a little nugget for people. We've mentioned this in the past before, but there is a thing called Facebook transparency that you can access on different Facebook pages. Let's say, Brene Brown or Tony Robbins or whoever it is that you're like, well, I wonder what they're doing. I wonder what ads they're running. If you Google search Facebook transparency, there's actually a space on their Facebook page where Facebook will show you all of the ads that they're currently spending money on. So that's a great resource to be able to start that brainstorming process.
And if you do that, one piece of advice I would give is look at the ads that actually have a lot of engagement on it, because if Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that page, the transparency page, will show you all ads running, but just because it's running doesn't necessarily mean it's converting for them. However, if that ad has a lot of engagement, it probably means it's been running for a while. And if it's been running for a while, it probably means it's converting for them. Is that an okay way to look at it, you think?
Yeah, that's right. And also, when you go to Facebook transparency, you'll see like duplicates of ads. And that's usually because those ads live within different ad sets, which is a good indicator that those are successful ads also. So if you see a lot of a different ad type, that usually means that they've kind of multiplied that and are using that across multiple different ad sets and things like that. So yeah, looking for engagement, looking for, when you're scrolling through that, the ad that keeps popping up time and time again as you're scrolling through is a good indicator.
Okay, great. And then I want to ask you your thoughts between video and images, but I'm going to ask that in a second because there's a couple of things that I wanted to address that you talked about, which I thought was really smart. So one of the things we talk about with messaging is that, or one of the ways I look at messaging is that when I read copy or an ad or read a book, and I recognize myself automatically coming up with a decision or automatically feeling a demand or automatically feeling like I want to opt in, I always ask myself, what did they just do to create that automated response? And so to tack on to what Matt is saying is look at content. But what I would say is when you see an ad and that creative makes you want to opt in, ask yourself, what are they doing with this creative that's causing me to want to do this? And then you can just replicate it. I also know Matt uses TikTok a lot, and we'll find really cool concepts on TikTok and YouTube. One of the ads that we ran, I think about 2 or 3 years ago that did really well for us was what we call the Superman ad, where I am on the desk and then I'm like, oh my gosh, something happened. And I run into the other room and I jump and there's a big explosion. I'm like floating like Superman. And while I'm floating, I deliver this message of like, hey, this video is really cool, but just keep in mind, messaging is the thing that really matters, because the messaging could kill a really cool video, something along those lines. And Matt, I believe you found that as in a YouTube tutorial, video editing tutorial or something, right? Like that's where that idea came from.
That's right. Yeah. So I've been a fan of a YouTube channel called Film Riot for a while. It's a super fun, super wholesome channel. It's a bunch of guys that started 15 years ago with a small little filmmaking shop, and now they're doing some really big things. And they had this small little tutorial on how to have someone jump and freeze, or make it look like they're freeze framed or frozen in the air. And for whatever reason, I was like, well, let's try this and let's kind of spin it into, the fact that it looks cool, but if the messaging isn't on point, then it is what it is. So that's exactly where that came from. Just a tutorial from perusing around YouTube on some channels that I pay attention to.
Yeah. And I love that advice. I love the advice of just like, look at what trends or content are already getting traction and just use that within your brand instead of trying to like just magically brainstorm on a whiteboard, especially if you've never gotten
Yeah,
ads that work before.
that could be
Sometimes
tough.
that's not the best idea. Okay, great. So let's move on to video versus images. Do you have any rules, philosophies, or is it just as simple as do all of it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about advertisement is, or running ads online, or whatever you want to call it, paid media, media buying, it's tough because it's massaging, it's not creating processes. You always have to be like massaging things in different ways to try and garner a result, but then 6 months from now that result won't work for you anymore. So you have to kind of like try different things. There's no rigid structure to any of the processes that we have necessarily, because running ads it's a creative place where you kind of have to be okay with spending some time, getting used to some creatives, getting inspired, and kind of just being like, all right, well, let me try this kind of creative. So when we think about images and video, we hope there's really, I mean, we do more video than images because video absolutely is a much more engaging medium on things like Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. But that's not to say that images can't absolutely own video with the results. So we absolutely will do both. And like you said, earlier, Brandon, you go in and kind of tinker with some things and turn things on and try some different ads and stuff like that, because you have a little bit of a background. Years ago, you were even more in the game of ads and running ads and stuff like that. So that's incredibly important. Being able to replicate that and replicate, hey, let me just take this, random white background and put black text on it and see if that works. It's incredibly important. So unfortunately, there's no like rhyme or reason necessarily to
Right.
this many video and this many images. What I would say though is, as much as you can stomach to create is absolutely what you should be making, and as long as it's kind of within the parameters that you kind of want to test out. Also, I think there's a lot of leniency we need to give for paid ads specifically, because the reality to paid ads is it's interruption marketing when we're trying to get people onto our webinars or
It
into
is.
our funnels. It's we're reaching into someone's life that doesn't care about us, they don't know us, they don't know who we are, and asking of them to take some kind of action. So we need to be kind of like lean towards things that are maybe a little bit outside of our comfort zone, or maybe is a trend that we've seen going around and stuff like that, specifically in paid media. Obviously, there's reason to that, or within reason to what your brand is, but just create as much as you can, and really understand that this first touch, the creative that we're talking about, is really just the 2 seconds of interaction where you get someone to either let their guard down, or you get them to laugh, or you position something in an interesting way visually or something like that, that then creates the Trojan horse for your message to kind of take the person home and bring them into your actual funnel.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because I think one of our focuses when it comes to creative is something that's going to stop the scroll. Like that is a normal theme conversation we have when we talk ads, is like, how do we stop the scroll and how do we become like really eye catching? And I know with some of our still images, like a picture of me or something, you guys even add motion to them. Is there a place someone can go to like do that, to add motion to like still images to kind of like make them a little bit more eye catching?
Absolutely, yeah. So you could take any image, you could jump onto Fiverr and type in the word parallax,
Hmm.
and that should pop up a whole bunch of different options where people will take an image, they'll cut you out of the background and kind of make it separate and move and make it a little bit more engaging to, like you just said, kind of stop the scroll.
Yeah, I love that. Some of the things that we've used over the years to be eye catching is things like trying to be funny. We focused on problems like we just talked about earlier with the images, and then also getting very specific with language that we're using in there. I want to ask you about the barbecue ad, because I know you were the one that scripted it and I kind of tinkered it a little bit before we filmed it. But in your opinion, why do you think the barbecue ad works so well? The one where it's like the conversation between myself and myself.
Yep. I think it works so well because, and for everyone that's listening to this, you might be able to go track these down online somewhere, but we've done some pretty crazy ads to try and get people smiling in the past. We've dressed Brandon up in purple blow up, suits. We've put Brandon in 80s attire. We've made him breakdance in front of his house. We've done a whole bunch of stuff to try and like tie in with some like, really kind of like pun cheeky language, the what it was we were, trying to get people to do, join a webinar or something like that. But I think why the barbecue ad works so well is because it's a self conversation. For those that have never seen it, I'll take a second here just best describe it. So essentially, we have two Brandons in this video, and one Brandon is kind of like cooking and has his back turned, and then we see the other Brandon walk in and he sits down, and then Brandon and Brandon just have a conversation with each other, and one Brandon is super pompous and very like, hey, I just heard this incredible information from all these gurus, and I'm gonna have an incredible time building my business, this, that, and the other. And then the other Brandon kind of starts to poke holes in this belief that he has that represents kind of the normal way that people go about doing things. So it's kind of like two Brandons talking to each other. And I think the reason it works so well is because it's actually it's funny. It's incredibly engaging. Like there's two Brandons there, and the conversation is scripted as such so that it's kind of like you're not making fun of the other Brandon, but you're kind of poking holes, and we're scripting it in a very fun way. But it's also incredibly pointed in the direction that we want to go for our messaging. We're literally able to use not another person, which might come across kind of mean, but literally just you with some camera trickery, kind of like going after yourself and the beliefs that your audience has, but it's masked as just another Brandon. So I think that's why that is so successful. And I was even surprised in this launch, actually. I was just looking at the numbers earlier today. That was actually our best performing ad. If you just look at total ad spend, total ad spend, that ended up consuming about, at least in cold audience land, which is where really all that we're talking about right now is kind of like cold audience for the most part. Right. That consumed about $18,000 worth of spend. The closest second was about $6,000, and that was the black and white text ad that you created. But hands down, that barbecue ad kind of ran away with it, and I think that's why.
Yeah, it was our best performing for a while, and then I decided to throw those other ones in a little late in the game. But it was drastic too. It was like as soon as it uploaded, like the cost per lead just literally overnight just dropped way down. And yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's why it performed so well. I mean, I didn't realize it until you're just kind of describing it, but it's basically a thought reversal video. It's a thought reversal video where someone had a belief, which was Brandon number one, and then Brandon number two came in and discredited and showed how the belief was flawed using metaphors and sleight of mouth patterns and stuff like that. I didn't realize it was a thought reversal video until you started to describe it. But you said something really interesting, again, that I just realized, which was that it was a thought reversal video, but it wasn't a thought reversal video speaking directly to the audience. So it wasn't like the audience was getting like their beliefs smashed directly. It was like they were witnessing it indirectly through someone else, which was another version of me. So it was almost like the audience wasn't getting talked to or talked at, which I think a lot of ads do. They were witnessing a conversation that they could relate to, but it wasn't like they were getting attacked or their belief was directly being sleight-of-mouthed or telling, they weren't being told directly they were doing something wrong. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. You mentioned, you said something recently. I want to say it was either on a podcast recently or somewhere. We may have even been talking about it 15 minutes ago. My memory's terrible, but you were talking about how with jokes, it might've been social media posts that I saw with jokes and comedians. The reason why great comedians are as great as they are is because they're able to set up this joke with a true like butt end of the joke that isn't you specifically, but that butt end of the joke is the proxy that you identify with hardcore. How many times do you find yourself when you're laughing at a joke going, oh my goodness, that is so me. Right. You know what I mean? Like you're not the one being, kind of like joked about, but you're able to identify with that. So I think that it's the exact same mechanism in that barbecue ad. We've created a proxy for the audience to go, oh my goodness, listening to all the gurus, diving into my avatar, listing out what magazines they like and all the different places that they go to. That is so me. I've done that so many times. That way, now we're able to use the other brand and to just credit that and bring them to where we want them to be in a very soft, approachable, fun, and entertaining way.
Yeah, I like that. I think we should do more of those things. I mean, they're definitely a lot more time consuming to create. But again, when we're running like $200,000 in ads and we can get a 25% lower cost per lead, it saves a ton of money. So I like that.
And if you're looking for, if you're shout out to Josh and Jill Stanton, because they were a huge inspiration for that. Watching some of their ads, we kind of came onto some of that. So although we kind of like set up and shot ours, in a little, with like, higher end cameras and stuff like that and scripted in this and the other. If anyone's looking for inspiration, I would hit up Page Transparency on Josh and Jill's page, because they have some really funny, cool ads that they just shoot right on their phones. And it's the exact same thing that we're talking about right now. That kind of like, they're two people, obviously, so they can kind of go back and forth. But even if it's just you, can garner some inspiration on maybe how to shoot very simply this kind of conversation back and forth that creates a proxy for your audience to identify with.
Well, that's great. I love this whole like proxy conversation, because again, that is exactly what they're doing. Is they're acting out real life scenarios that we like the people that they can help go through, which is, they talk about the bad launches, they talk about the mistakes, but they always have Josh being the person making the mistakes. And they always have Jill being the person who comes in and saves the day, which I think is great. But yeah, they're doing exactly what we just talked about. Is they're describing situations, through a scenario that people get to watch. So again, they're not talking directly to you or at you, but through this proxy, or because of what they're talking about, it's so relatable without it being like in a direct, I don't know, attack on you or conversation with you. But yeah, they are great. And I know they always said that we were inspiration to them. So if they're watching, now they know the truth. Now they know that we're really monitoring their ads when we create ours. But yeah,
Brandon has his little minions with our little tentacles out there looking for inspiration from you guys.
Go find our next ad. Go find it. Okay, cool. Anything else on creative that you think we should mention before we wrap up creative and move on to headline?
I think that's really it. I think the biggest place where people get stuck is realizing that they need to be consuming as much as it hurts to say. I wish there was a process or a document I could put out and just say, follow these steps and you'll have your successful creative ads. You just have to kind of start consuming and start like garnering ideas, let the creative bone that everyone has in their body kind of like take over for a little bit and just start getting some creative ideas. And never forget that ads are there's always two main parts to an ad, like Brandon talked about. There's the creative and there's the message. And never forget that only one of those can do without the other, right? Messaging can do without creative and still be effective. But creative is nothing without the messaging. So the messaging is clearly a lot more important, but the creative is that thing that can be the difference between a higher cost per acquisition, because it's just not as, able to jump into someone's life and pull their attention, as getting a more creative ad. And that comes from just consuming.
Well, and that's 100% true. Cause in this last launch, when I pulled in, that creative, when I pulled in that barbecue ad, I didn't use the copy from last year. I actually used the exact same copy that we had on all the other ads that were converting at $25. And I just plugged in the barbecue ad into the copy that was already there. And then that drastically dropped the cost per lead. So the creative alone can have a major difference, but it is because the messaging was already effective. It is just, we just probably didn't have it paired with a creative that really spoke to people or grabbed their attention or stopped the scroll. So again, they go hand in hand. And I agree that messaging is the most important part, but play around with creatives, like use some images, use different video ads, use parallax. Like you just never know. Okay. So let's move on to headline. And headline, for those of you who don't know, is going to be the thing underneath the creative. It's usually bold. It's usually sometimes bigger text. There's there's three ways I normally look at this. I haven't found one way outperforming another way, but there's three ways that I look at headlines and three things that I usually test and try on headlines. Number one is I usually just put whatever the next step is and whatever the item is that I want them to opt in for. So if it's a free training or free webinar, I'll just start with like free webinar in brackets so people know what it is. I also try to use different language. So instead of free, I like to use things like no cost, or if I'm not going to pitch on the webinar, I'll say pitch free webinar, just so I'm saying something different. I don't want my headlines to blend in with other people's headlines. And if other people are saying things like free webinar, then I don't want to say free webinar. So I figure out different ways to say it, but I'll usually say whatever the next step is going to be. And there's a reason why, and I'll tell you that reason in a second. And then I usually will use the title of whatever the next step is. So if the next step is a webinar and it's titled How to Create Engaging Content, my headline will literally say no cost training, how to create engaging content. And then what I do is I make sure the opt-in page uses almost the exact same headline. That way all my messaging is congruent. But here's the thing. If someone clicks on your ad to go to the opt-in page, they clicked on the ad because whatever you did in the ad was effective. So do not change the messaging on the opt-in page. Keep it exactly the same. And that's the reason why I have the headline as the next step. Because if someone doesn't want to watch a webinar and I just put like how to create engaging content and they click on my ad and they're like, oh, it's a webinar, then they leave, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt my performance. That's going to hurt my opt-in rate. That's going to hurt my conversion rate. But if I can put webinar or free training or 45-minute training up front, then people know that when they click, they're opting in for 45-minute training. The opt-in page doesn't hold any surprises for them. They know exactly what they need to do next. They know when they need to opt in. They already know when they click, they already are making a subconscious commitment to opting in and attending this webinar. So I always like to put the next step into the headline. Next one is if I don't put a next step in there, I make sure that it's pain focused. And the reason why it's pain focused is my intention is to actually get them to go read the copy. So if I have an ad image asking a question about a pain point or a problem they're going through, I will reiterate that pain point in the headline. And the whole point is that if that pain point is effective, I'm going to get them to read the copy. And if I can get them to read the copy and my copy is completely dialed in, that will be of an advantage to me. And we experienced that on this last launch where people would come into our Facebook group and they're literally saying what you said in the ad, it explained my situation to a T, explained what I was doing and what I was experiencing. And I'm here for that, which means they actually read the copy. So this idea of a pain point in the creative, a pain point in the headline, a specific one they're experiencing is enough to get them the copy. And if the copy is written well enough, they will automatically go, this person's speaking to me. And now what you get is you have leads coming into your launch already at a certain level of awareness, already wanting what you're about to say. And we'll talk about copy here in a second, but the way I write copy isn't about talking about isn't talking about explaining a problem. It is, like giving a solution or anything like that. I'm not explaining myself. I'm focusing on here's what you're doing. Here's what's causing the mistake. Here's examples of people not making the mistakes you are and doing something different. And then I'm going to teach you this new thing on this webinar or whatever it is. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay. But the point is with a headline, you either want the next step, or if your creative is going to be pain focused, a pain focused headline can also be a great option to try, and use that with the objective of getting people to read the copy. So hopefully that makes sense. And then sometimes what I'll do is I will do a curiosity solution focused headline. And I usually will ask a question. So for example, if I had an image for my ad, the creative, and it said, is your content not converting ? My headline might say something like, are you using mostly how-to content ? So it's almost like they go together. It's almost like I didn't have enough room in the creative to put the two questions. So I put the second question in the headline. Again, the objective with that is to get them to read the copy. Okay, so those are the 3 ways that I usually like to write headlines. So let's move on to the copy, because that's kind of the next step here. There's 3 things that I like to do inside of, actually 3 things that I like to do inside of the copy. Number 1 is I just use a straight up thought reversal script. Like, that's it. So I make sure it's in alignment with whatever's in the creative and in the headline. So if I'm talking about engaging content and not doing how-to content in the headlines and in the creative, then I better sure as heck make sure that my copy is a continuation of that. So all 3 are working together. Number 2 is I do an awareness increase focused copy. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then the next one is kind of similar to the other 2, but it's a discredit of a belief that's causing suffering. Okay, so that's kind of like a thought reversal, but I'll talk about the difference here in a second. Let's start with thought reversal. If you don't know what a thought reversal is, just go to YouTube and type in thought reversal. We have a tutorial there explaining it. But what I'm going to do with a thought reversal is I'm going to take a big industry norm that I'm also going to tackle inside of my creative. So if my creative, like the barbecue ad, it tackled a industry norm, which was how-to content isn't how to grow a business online. What I'm going to do is thought reversal this belief that how-to content isn't how to build a business online, to make sure the copy is congruent with the ad and it's congruent with the headline. Pretty self-explanatory. Just use a thought reversal script. Number 2, an awareness increase. An awareness increase is when I combined specific problems or a problem that someone is having. Then I combine it with mistakes, like specific mistakes they're making right now that are causing those problems that they are unaware of. This is why it's called awareness increase. So I use the mistakes and actions they're taking that are causing the problem that they're unaware of. Then I will back it up with a counterexample of someone, something, or a book or something that did not make those mistakes and saw the results that they wanted. So for example, I start with the problems. The problem would be something like, are you doing how-to content, not getting the traction you want, not getting engagement? One of the biggest mistakes why your content isn't getting engagement is because you're focusing so much on educational content. That's like taking an encyclopedia and trying to get into the top of the best-selling charts. When we look at Gary Vaynerchuk, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, they are not focusing on tutorials, and their content and following is growing faster than anyone in the space right now. That's it. Those 3 things allow for an awareness increase. They go, oh my God, they aren't doing that. Oh my God, I am doing that. Oh my God, that is the same thing as trying to get an encyclopedia ranked in, the top best-selling book list. And then my call to action becomes like, want to learn what they're doing? Well, hop onto our webinar, hop onto our training. So that's what I would call an awareness increase. Again, it's very similar to a thought reversal video. A thought reversal script and video may go a little bit more into the solution than that, but they're they're pretty dang close. And then the last one also, again, is pretty dang close, is a discredit of a belief. This is very much like we just get right to it. We pretty much just say, look, I know you're likely doing X, Y, and Z. So we start with the problem or the action they're doing. You're likely doing X, Y, and Z. It's likely causing, let me restart that. You're likely doing X, Y, and Z. So we start with the mistakes. Even though this counterexample is not doing those things, and because of it, you're likely having these problems. So it's, you likely are not getting engaging content and focusing, let me repeat that. You're likely focusing mostly on all how-to content, even though people like Gary Vaynerchuk and Tony Robbins aren't focusing on content and they're soaring to the top. And because you're doing this, you're likely having content get no engagement. You're not getting any traction on your content. You're not doing X, Y, and Z. So this is really a discredit of the belief. We start with the action they're doing. We use a counterexample to prove that that isn't what the big people are doing, the people with big results are doing. Then we go into the problems, and then we move to the call to action. Again, all 3 of those are relatively the same. They're just using the same elements in different ways. Okay? Now, what most people do with copy is they start talking about the benefits and here's what you need to do, and they start explaining or justifying why someone should opt in. I never do that. I never try to justify why you should opt in. I want to make a case to your subconscious to let your subconscious know you're making mistakes and it's causing a problem in your life and I have the solution. I want their subconscious to automatically know that. And that only happens by meeting them where they're at. Okay, so that's how we kind of facilitate the copy. So let's recap where we are before we move into the last little part of this. Remember, we never know what's going to convert. Try a bunch of different things. Try different copy, try different creatives, try images, try videos. We talked about eye-catching creative, stopping the scroll creative. We talked about making sure that you're consuming creative, and when there is a piece of content or an idea that captures your attention instantly, like maybe try replicating it. Study what other people are doing as well that captures your attention and maybe try that. That's how we want to handle creatives. Headlines, you can do next step based headline, a pain-focused headline, or a solution-focused headline. And then the copy can be a thought reversal, awareness increase, or a discredit of a belief. And we do not want to over-explain or justify ourselves inside of our ads. So some of the ways we've been able to do this is we've used things like we talked about today. We use the convo ad. We're having a conversation between me and myself. Jill and Josh Stanton do a great job with those. Problem-based ads are working really well for us as well. So an image just with a problem on it and just asking a question, are you experiencing this problem? Are you doing this one thing? You know, that type of stuff. And then those are the main two that have been working the best for us right now. And the last thing that I want to leave you with before we wrap up this episode is just know that every ad has a lifespan. Some of the biggest mistakes I've made is just trying to reuse things over and over and over and over and over again because I either got lazy or I don't have time. But just know an ad does have a lifespan. For example, the Superman ad that we talked about, it worked really well for us for like 2, maybe 3 years. And then 1 year, it just stopped working. And it's weird because we use the same targeted cold traffic with pretty much the same opt-in, the same training, and it just stopped converting. Don't know why, it just did. So you want to be prepared for that. Just know that your best performing ad will only be your best performing ad for a certain amount of time. So you have to constantly be testing and tweaking. One of the things that biggest pieces of advice that I can give you is that you shouldn't really be guessing too much on the themes of your ads and your funnels. You want to let your upfront content dictate the themes and stuff that you use inside of your ads. If there's a really high converting thought reversal video you did with your content, great. Use that topic as an ad and maybe a title of a webinar. Like, don't be guessing at everything. Yes, even though you have the theme, you still need to guess at like what creative is going to work. How do I write this copy? How do I say it? But at least you have an overall theme of something you know people are interested in instead of guessing at everything. And that's what most people do. They guess at the webinar title. They guess at what people might want. They guess at 1 or 2 creatives. They guess at copy. We want to eliminate as much guesswork as we can when it comes to paid advertising. And even then, you still have to constantly test and listen to the data. So that is kind of our overview philosophy of how we look at ads, what we've used this past year, so 2021, to profit off of our $700,000 in ad spend. All of that was, we had a profit on. We didn't lose any money on any ads that we spent in 2021. And that's pretty much our whole philosophy right there. So hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, let me know. If you want more episodes like this one, please let me know. And you can do that by either leaving us a review on iTunes, or you can share this episode on Instagram or somewhere and tag us. And with that said, we'll wrap up here, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care, everyone. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check this out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.